Welcome to the Beehive, you bees, and we have a double hitter for you today. Can you say I have a bird that's really playing on me, so I apologize for that. We're having a lot of fun here in the hive. And we have a double hitter today. We have the show of the 1970s, and we have the rocket. Russell Green's going to be in the hive today for a show. And if you enjoy the content of this show, please subscribe to the YouTube channel and ring that notification bell because we have lots of shows coming up and you're not going to want to miss any of them. We have a great week ahead of us right now, and we have the Northern California Speedway Week. Welcome to the Northern California Week in the Hive. And we have a really great week. It's all Northern California Week, starting with the amazing Russell Green, the Rocket, in the Hive. Then following Russell, we have the promoter of Fast Fridays, the one, the only, Dave Joyner. After Dave, we have a writer, a very good young writer, very talented, Mr. Reese Todd. It's going to be an all Northern California week this week in the Hive. You're not going to want to miss it. We may have some surprise visitors, so stay tuned. All week, Northern California is in the Hive. Northern California in the Hive. Be there! Yeah, be there. In 4 hours, we got Russell Green here live in the Beehive. And on Tuesday night, we have Dave Joyner. You're going to want to hear what's happening in Fast Fridays. The season is upon us, and we want to hear from the promoter, Dave Joyner, what's happening in the Fast Friday Speedway. And the next night, on Wednesday night, we have Reese Todd. He did pretty well here in Bakersfield with his brother, Brenton Todd. But today, we're going to talk 1970s Speedway. Do you remember 1970s Speedway? Well, if you haven't remembered that, we're going to talk about that right now. And 1970s was pretty cool. This was one of my favorite riders in the 1970s. This is Ruben Benitez. Do you know Ruben? Probably not. He wasn't a very famous rider. but he was one of my favorite riders. He was a young gun, and he was just a real high flyer. He was a cool dude. He used to sign autographs for me every week, and he gave me lots of attention. So he became my favorite rider, Ruben Benitez. See, you riders, if you give lots of attention to your fans, I have a bird here. That is Bebop. If you give lots of attention to your fans will remember you forever. And I always remember Ruben Benitez. He's a great guy. And so we had lots of cool stuff in the 70s. We had this like dream team of all American speedway riders riding in Europe. We had these great riders, and we had the legendary announcer Larry Huffman interviewing a very young Gene Woods. He was like 10 or 11 years old. We like that guy, Gene Woods. He's cool. And then we had Gene, the dancing machine. Gene was dancing. There's Danny Berserko Becker and Williams, Ed Williams. We have a screaming bird. Danny Becker was with Gene, the dancing machine. And we have a dancing machine right next to us. And I think his name was Ed Williams. He was a good rider too. So we had lots of stuff in the 1970s. It was really a great time. And here's Ken Maley, the hot shoe man. Do you remember Ken Maley? He was a very good hot shoe man. Yeah, we like Ken Maley. He was really just a very big part of the 1970s. That's why we got to remember him. And we had the Bass brothers, who won 8 out of 10 United States Speedway Championships, and the captain of the first United States Speedway team in Europe and Australia, Slidin' Sonny Nutter. He was a senior member of the Speedway team. We had some really great times in the 1970s. It was just a really, really fantastic time. And we're going to go ahead and talk about the 1970s. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to play this video. So you know what the 1970s, you probably know, but if you don't know, you're going to know right now. Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about some interesting things. And first, subscribe to the channel down below, the little red button. And we're going to talk about some speedway and a lot more. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. Today we're going to take a trip down memory lane, back to the early days of the American Speedway back in the 1970s, the glory days, the days that we thought would never end. We're going to talk about that right now. Today we're going to talk not about the speedway riders, about the atmosphere, about what's going on, mainly the Costa Mesa Fairgrounds, but we're going to talk about what it was like to be a speedway fan in the 1970s. The first thing you think of is what? Gene, the dancing machine. Do you know who Gene was? Gene was a very famous party animal in the stands, and he would go in the stands and ignite the fans to cheer more beer. It was a party animal. Everybody loved Gene, the dancing machine. It was just a total party. I mean, Gene was up there going crazy. Sometimes he would climb on the crash wall where the speedway crash wall is, and he would be walking drunk on this crash wall, walking, and then all of a sudden he would yell, "More beer!" And everyone would go, "Yeah, Gene!" It was awesome. Gene was the dancing machine.
was yelling, more beer, everybody! But he was not going to pay for that beer for everybody. He just wanted you to buy. Maybe he had a percentage at the concession stands. But Gene was walking and he was yelling, more beer! And then he slipped and he would fall. And he would fall on his groin, do the splits on the crash wall. And he sang in soprano after that. Besides watching the Speedway races when I was a little kid, one of my favorite parts of the Speedway was the fights. Every Friday night there was fights. There were drunk guys in the stands. They just wanted something to do, so they'd go there and drink a lot of alcohol, and then they would fight. So everyone stood, fight over there, and then a little bit later, fight over there. There was fights everywhere, and I was like, right on. You got the Speedway, and then you got the fights. I wasn't really into chicks at that time. Those were the days of the SRA. Do you remember the SRA? Do you know the SRA? The Speedway Racing Association. That was governed by the president, Jerry Fairchild, and they guaranteed like 35% of the gate to the motorcycle riders. We liked that as riders. Some of the riders, like Mike Bass, they would go home with $1,000 a night. Only the winners got a lot of money, but they were making a living. They were making like $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year if they were good. It was great. Those were the glory days of Speedway when the SRA was governing it. I think back in those days, the DG dirt was a lot cheaper. Why? Because they had lots of dirt on the outside. We saw guys like in the last blog, Danny Berserko Becker riding that crash wall on the wheelie. We saw lots of riders. They loved the outside. The outside had lots of traction for passing. And Billy Gray was one of the guys too. And also if you sat behind the wall, you got lots of dirt in your Coke or beer. And it was just crazy the amount of dirt that flew over. We used to have like mass tear-offs, and the dirt would go wah, and would go all over the face mask. And we loved sitting where the mud was flying in our faces. Another great thing about early day Speedway back in the 70s was the smell. The castor oil and the nitro. They burned nitro in those days. And the castor oil. It smelled like heaven. It was the most beautiful smell in the world, the castor oil. And it was just fantastic. I was a little young at that time, but one of the reasons why the 70s was so fantastic for Speedway was the chicks, the girls. All the hot-looking chicks went to the Speedway. I was just a little kid. I didn't really pay attention that much. I liked the fights a little better, but the girls were really beautiful, and the guys followed. It was just a hangout place to be. The chicks all came, and then the guys came. They even had a Fox night. A Bruce Penhall, Bruce the Fox Penhall, Fox night. All the chicks were free and all the dudes had to pay. That's not fair. And who could forget Larry Huffman? Larry Huffman, the voice of the Grant Boys. And he was the announcer at the Speedway. And Larry was just an amazing announcer. He would just electrify the crowd every Friday night at Costa Mesa Fairgrounds. He was just amazing. He would just make a boring race exciting. He was just an amazing announcer. And he would do the Huffman Shuffle. The 1970s, who could forget those days? The glory days of Speedway. They were just absolutely great. Everyone just had a good time. The Speedway was fantastic. The living legends of the 70s. There can be no other better group of Speedway riders ever, including my group or any group. The group now, they can't compare. Sorry guys. But the 1970s group, the Bass Brothers, the Woods, everybody was just amazing. You had the speedway races, and then you had the activity in the stands, the smell of the speedway bikes, Larry Hoffman, the fights, the chicks, everything. Costa Mesa Fairgrounds Friday night was a place to be. Well, that's it. 1970s was one of the most amazing times in US Speedway history. The revival of Speedway in 1968, and it carried through the 70s. So we want to thank you so much for watching the blog, my blog today. And we ask that you go ahead and subscribe. There's other videos right here you can go ahead and watch. That's fantastic. That was a really great era. So thank you so much for watching. And please like, share, subscribe, and ring that bell.
And ring that bell. Hey, I like that. That was a cool time, the 1970s. And Costa Mesa opened up in June of 1969 in the summer of 69. 69. That's a Bryan Adams song. I like Bryan. Anybody with a name of Bryan, I like that guy. And so the first United States Speedway champion in Costa Mesa in the summer of 69 was this guy right here, Stephen Bass. He was the first United States Speedway champion at the Costa Mesa Speedway. Stephen Bass was an amazing rider. He was just the first guy to win that national championship at the Costa Mesa Bull Ring. And he had a brother. His brother is Michael Bass. Michael Bass and Steve Bass were dominant in the 1970s. That's why we start off with these guys. They won 8 out of 10 United States Speedway championships in the 1970s. 80% of the nationals were won by the Bass brothers. Go figure. That will never happen again. I promise you. Those guys were sensational, the Bass brothers. And they just had talent that never ended. They were just truly amazing riders.
I love the Bass brothers, Mike and Steve Bass. They were the bomb. I mean, these guys were hardcore. These guys were hardcore. Mike was just like a champion like 10 or 11 times. I mean, he won championships all the time. In fact, he won so many championships and won so many main events in a row. I think he was one of the leading records for some time. And everybody booed him. They booed him because he won so much. And everybody booed him. They booed him because he won so much. And I was like, wow. But my favorite actually was not really Mike, even though I liked him. My favorite was Steve. Steve Bass in the baby blue leathers. I love that guy. He was number 1 or number... He was number 1 or number 6, and he was so fast. And I remember going down the pits and seeing him right before the race, like on the track, next to the track. And Steve was so intense. He was like going to kill somebody out there. He was so like, ugh. And Steve was just a racer, and he was hardcore. And he was kind of a radical dude. And I just liked that guy. I liked him, even though I wasn't like him really. But he was just so intense. And hey, and Mike was more like me, just a smooth guy, calm, a rider. But
Steve was like, ah! And he was really good. And Steve ride the outside, and he was fast. Steve didn't win all the time, but when he won, it was spectacular. And Steve was just one of the best ever. Steve was just one of the best ever, and Mike was definitely one of the best ever. They were just the Bass brothers. I mean, number one. Who could not love the Bass brothers? They were just the bomb. I mean, these guys were just crazy good. Michael Bass just won like 5 United States championships in a row and 7 in the 70s. I mean, that's just crazy. And we'd love to have Michael Bass on the Old Timers show we're going to have in a few weeks, I hope. And we'd love to just talk to Mike for like 5 minutes. We really like Michael Bass and Steve Bass. They were both amazing. But Michael Bass was even better than his brother, Steven. And I thought Steven was the bomb.
I never made it, but I know what it takes. I'm motivated by a mix of emotion.
Welcome back. And yesterday, or the last vlog, we talked about how Michael Bass, he actually learned how to ride a motorcycle. And he was racing TT. And he bought the first JP motorcycle and shared it with his brother Steve and started racing. And today we're going to talk about what happened after that. So we're going to talk about that right now. The 1970s was the Bass Brothers decade. Mike Bass in particular won 7 out of 10 United States Nationals. That's 70% of the Nationals that Mike won. And his brother Steve won 1 in 74.
Another reason to breathe this air.
So that was 80% of the Nationals in the 1970s. And the Rocket Rick Wood won 2. So basically it was the Bass Brothers and Rick Woods. They completely owned the 1970s. 1969 was a revival of Speedway at Costa Mesa Speedway. And Steve Bass went ahead and won the first national championship at Costa Mesa Speedway. Steve was an amazing rider. He was one of my favorites. Actually, he's probably my favorite. I love Steve's intensity. He was amazing. That guy, when he got on the track, he was like, I'm gonna get you. He was very intense, and Steve was just an amazing rider. But he won the first United States Championship at the Costa Mesa Bull Ring. In 1974, Steve Bass went ahead and edged out his brother Mike for the United States Championship. Mike won like 5 United States National Championships in a row after that. A guy from England asked me, why didn't Mike race in England? They were very upset. Over at the pond, they're very angry that the Bass Brothers didn't race full-time at the pond. And I said, hey, Mike had a business racing Speedway. He made lots of money in the 70s. And he won a lot. So he was married to his wife Dee. He didn't need to go over to the pond. Why? Because he was cleaning up at Costa Mesa and other tracks. Mike was making a great living racing Speedway. And the brother Steve, he went from buying his first JP and sharing it with his brother Mike in 1968 to 1969, winning the United States National Championship. Like I said, in the 70s, We saw the Bass brothers win 80% of the United States Nationals. When are you going to ever see that again? Never in the history of Speedway. You're not going to see dominance. 80% of the Nationals won by a brother team. Or Rick Woods won 2 national championships, like I mentioned, in the 70s, 1970 and 1972. One of the reasons that the Bass brothers were so dominant, and Michael Bass, in the 1970s is the European riders. They came over to Costa Mesa Speedway for exhibition, and they wiped out the American Speedway team. They had all the old 1968 style of Speedway riding. Ivan Major and Barry Briggs came over and said, no, 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 you gotta learn how to ride Speedway the right way. Ivan and Barry went ahead and taught Mike how to ride the Speedway bike, and probably Steve too. And they went ahead and were all ears. Everyone needs a coach. I was mentioning to even Bruce Penhall yesterday that everyone needs a coach, and he said that Mike Bass coached him also. So Mike Bass needed a coach, and Ivan Major was Michael Bass's coach. 1971 was probably Mike's most exciting year racing Speedway. Why? He won his first United States Speedway Championship. He only raced like for 3 years, and he was a United States Speedway champion. His brother Steve only raced like 2 years and was United States Speedway champion. Mike went ahead and beat out Mike Conley. Big Mike Conley, number 89. Mike beat out Mike Conley. Mike beat Mike for the United States Championship in a runoff. In the early 70s, Mike and his brother Steve and a few other American Speedway legends, they went to Australia and New Zealand to do exhibitions and races, and they went ahead and developed their skills on the very long tracks. And then they came home probably to Costa Mesa, and they probably had to relearn how to ride all over again. But Mike and Steve and the rest of Team America went ahead and developed themselves during the off season in the 70s, and they became better Speedway riders, and Speedway grew and grew in popularity. And it was the heyday of Speedway in the 1970s. In the 1970s, Mike set a record for the most scratch main event wins at Costa Mesa. Until like the 80s, Alan Crazy Christian went ahead and broke that record. But in the 70s, Michael Bass was winning everything, and he was winning a lot of money too. I was in the stands in the 70s. I was a little kid watching the races, and everybody was what? Booing Mike Bass. I was shocked. I turned around. I didn't know what they were doing. I was a little kid. And the people said, we're tired of Michael Bass winning all the main events. We want to see somebody new. But Michael Bass didn't allow that. He kept winning and winning and winning and winning and winning and winning, 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 winning. I was home one Saturday morning reading the Orange County Register, and they had an article on Mike Bass, on his winning. They said that Mike won like $500 or $1,000 every night when he won at Costa Mesa. The reason why Mike made so much money is the SRA. Jerry Fairchild was the president, and they guaranteed the riders 30% of the gate, the money plus the purse. The riders were making all kinds of money, and it was just great. Mike Bass made a living. That's why he didn't go to Europe. Why? Because he was making a lot of money. In 1976, the godfather of Speedway, Harry Oxley, he went ahead and kicked out the SRA. He banned it forever. And it pissed off Michael Bass. Why? Because he was making a lot of money. Harry Oxley said, we're not going to have the SRA no more, and 30% of the gate, no more. it caused a lot of friction with Mike Bass and Harry Oxley. They fought. And Mike Bass went ahead and organized a picket. A picket! Remember that one in the late 70s? They went ahead and picketed Costa Mesa Speedway for like 4 or 5 weeks. They were, and I was actually there in the picket line. I had to because Jerry, the president of SRA, was my tuner. He said, Brian, you better go picket or I'm kicking you out. Even the legendary announcer, Larry Motormouth Huffman, was in the picket line. It was just crazy. You know, the riders would have rather been riding than picketing. And I was up and coming in D1 also, and I was very sad. The rider and people would drive in the Costa Mesa Fairgrounds at 88 Fair Drive, and they would look at the riders and go, what the heck is this? And the riders had picket signs and were very upset, and the spectators turned their cars around and left. And sad to say that pretty much was the ending of the glory days of Speedway. We have more videos here if you want to go ahead and check out some Speedway and Mike Bass. And you can subscribe here at the bottom if you like the content of this video. We're going to talk more about the 1970s and Mike Bass. We just ran out of time, so we're going to talk more about what happened in the 70s and with Michael Bass. So please like, share, subscribe, and always ring that bell.
And ring that bell. Hey, Michael Bass was really good in the 1970s. I mean, he wore this #1 helmet very proudly. He was #1, and nobody was going to knock Michael Bass off of that one. But in 1968 at the Whiteman Stadium, and 1970 and 1972, this young man came to dominance and prominence at the Costa Mesa Speedway and Whiteman Stadium. That is the Rocket, Rick Woods, not Russell Green. That is the Rocket, Rick Woods, and he was truly the Rocket. And we have the Rocket in about 3 or 4 hours on the show. That's Russell Green. He's another Rocket, and he's fast. And Rick Woods was on the podium. He was on the podium 3 different times. And there he is with the Bass Brothers, #2 and #3, and Rick Woods at #1 on the podium. The Bass Brothers and Rick Woods did have quite a rivalry going on. These guys truly did not like each other very much. They had 2 alpha male men racing on the same track at the same time, and you're going to have a little bit of conflict. But Rick Woods was a really good brother. He has a little brother about 10 years younger than him named Gene Woods. And Gene Woods turned out to be a fantastic rider. And Rick Woods was tutoring young Gene while Gene was learning how to ride Speedway. And also here's Rick with little Gene Woods learning to ride a mini bike on the track or a junior speedway bike, probably junior speedway bike. And that is Ed Schaefer, that man sitting in the front, rest in peace. He was the mechanic of Rick Woods, and he was truly a genius. Ed Schaefer was truly just unbelievable. And also in the 70s, we had the second glamour boy. That was Danny Berserko Becker. Danny is just an amazing rider. He had the talent like no others. He was natural. He could ride the wheelie on the wall. He could ride all the way around the crash wall on the wheelie. That guy was just insane, and he was a natural speedway rider. He didn't have to practice. He was right, and he went ahead and had pretty good style too. Danny Berserko Becker was really great, and Rick Woods were truly amazing riders in the 70s. And here's a picture with Danny Berserko Becker and Rick Woods together, both of them riding as one picture. Those guys were truly talented, and they were truly good. Danny Berserko Becker and Rick Woods were just 2 of the most unbelievable riders in modern day history. And so we had really great riders, lots of great riders in the 70s. They were really good. But Danny Becker and Rick Woods were two of the new amazing riders. Actually, Rick Woods had been riding a long time, but Danny Becker was a newer rider at the time. And here is Rick Woods and Danny Berserko Becker. So my fondest memories, let's say, my fondest memories. Well, I used to love watching like Danny Berserko Becker. I used to love watching like Danny Berserko Becker. He used to like drive on the wall, you know, like do wheelies on the wall. I'm like, that guy's cool.
And every muscle must be.
You know, like do wheelies on the wall. I'm like, that guy's cool. He's cool. He used to like ride his bike and just do wheelies along the wall, going full speed. You know, this guy's like D1 rider, full speed. I'm like, I like that guy.
An acrobat without any power to control.
I like that guy. I like him. And so he was crazy, but he'd win sometimes. And I was like, oh, Danny Becker.
But now we can decide. And every muscle must be torn.
Oh, Danny Becker. And so I love Danny Becker a lot. And I bought my first bike from who? Danny Becker. Also, I loved watching Rick Woods. Rick Woods was called the Rocket, and he was so fast. He won a couple of United States championships, and I just remember how fast he was, especially in his early days.
The idea wasn't all mine. When we used to talk, our thoughts used to combine. Your melody was soft and unexpected.
He was just like riding so hard. He was smooth. Rick Woods was awesome. He was the bomb. And when I was older and raced, I went to Malibu Grand Prix next to the Angel Stadium, and Rick Woods was next to me, and I'm like, oh, there's Rick Woods.
So cool and you're an acrobat without any power to control. Mother Nature's on a roll and we are gone.
When I was a young racer. So anyways, Rick Woods was always one of my legends. I just loved Rick Woods. Number two, or number one, mostly, you know, the guy was like one or two. I mean, who could say that? Like, my number is one or two, you know, Rick Woods. He did pass away, sorry to say, and Rick Woods was just always my idol and a legend, and his brother Gene was always one of my idols, and I just love the Woods brothers. I love Rick Woods. True legends of early days Speedway, Rick Woods and Danny Berserko Becker. They were just incredible. And this bird's driving me crazy also. And more legends in the 1970s was this guy. Do you know this guy? You probably do if you ride Speedway. It's Wild Bill Cody. That's Bill Cody before he became old. He was a young man at the time. And he was a famous rider. Bill Cody was sensational. That guy could ride, and Bill Cody was the leading money earner in the early days before Michael Bassett dominated. But in the early 70s, actually, Bill Cody was the top money earner for a few years and the top 5 So Bill Cody made a lot of money to invest in his Jawa dealership. Here's a picture with Bill Cody in the middle with the Rocket Rick Woods on the inside and Sliding Sonny Nutter on the outside. Those guys were all legends. And Sonny Nutter was also a living legend of American Speedway. Just incredible talent those guys were. And Bill Cody, he raced TT for many years, the mile track at Sacramento. He was a top TT pro rider in the AMA. The guy was ranked in the top 5. I mean, this guy could ride. He went to Australia and was beating Barry Briggs and Ivan Major in their prime. I mean, Bill Cody was a fantastic long track rider and short track rider. He was a fantastic rider. Oh, what the heck. And then here he is with the master, Mike Bass. He's on the inside and he's giving Mike Bass a run for his money. So Bill Cody was just an unbelievable rider. I mean, in his prime, I raced Bill when he was a little older, so it was no fair because I was young and Bill was older. But when Bill was young, he was good. I mean, this guy was good. Here's Bill. He raced for the Eagles of the Costa Mesa. There's with Larry Huffman and his little boy. I think that's Bobby. I'm not sure, but Bobby on the wall. Now he's working for his papa in his shop, building engines and selling parts. But before, he was a little boy on the crash wall. So that was cool. And, you know, there were some good times in the early days of Speedway. The 1970s, the heyday of Speedway. It was good. And also another good rider in the 70s was Billy Gray. He was Bud on the TV series Father Knows Best. He was that little rascal named Bud. He was always making trouble. I like that guy. And he was a good rider. He was always making trouble on the Hollywood sets, drag racing motorcycles coming to the Hollywood studio. I mean, this guy was cool. You gotta like Billy Gray. Here's Billy Gray. He was just a classic guy. There was no other rider ever like Billy Gray. He was one of a kind. And he looked like a Tin Man soldier out there. He was just, no one could forget that guy. He just was crazy good rider. And here he is looking like a Tin Man soldier. I thought he was like something from a comic book or something. I love that guy. He was cool. And then he just would ride the bike really fast. He was kind of an outside rider, and he was fast, and he just knew how to ride a speedway bike. That is Billy Gray. Here he is in his early days with his long hair. He was kind of a wild cat, but we like and we love Billy Gray. He's still living today. He's like in his 80s, and he's had open heart surgeries and all kinds of stuff. And we would love to have Billy Gray on the show. Wouldn't that be cool? So if anyone knows how to get a hold of Billy Gray, you let me know, because I like that guy. He's getting old now, and we would love to talk with Billy Gray.
Next year or so, he took a movie role as a heroin drug dealer and pusher and stuff like that. And one of this film critic named Martin, he was writing that Billy Gray was a real-life drug pusher. And I don't think he was. And it actually ended Billy's career. But he started a lawsuit, a libel lawsuit, back in the early 70s. And then he started racing Speedway at the time, too. So it actually settled in 1997 for undisclosed amount of money. And in 1998, the film critic apologized and said he didn't mean to do that. And I think he did mean to do that. So I'm sure Billy got some money from that. And Billy was an inventor. He invented many things. He's quite the person, had quite the history as a childhood actor, an inventor, a motorcycle racer. And we'll talk about his motorcycle racing more. So in 1970, Billy was racing Speedway at Costa Mesa. He was wearing all this armor. I mean, he looked like the Tin Soldier. Everyone loved him. And the announcer, Larry Huffman, always announced him as the childhood star, Bud of the Father Knows Best, and everyone went crazy. So Billy was very popular, and he was a champion in everyone's hearts because he was very famous, and he won lots of main events, and he was a very successful speedway racer. He wasn't just an actor like going there to get popularity. He was a racer. That guy could race. People really loved him. He didn't win a championship, I believe, but the guy was just hardcore rider and just great. In Irwindale, they called him the Orange Blossom Bike because his tire rims were always orange. And so he kind of got that nickname for his bike. And just a couple days ago, I saw a race just a few years ago, I think 2014, where he was racing a current racer named Steve Murray. And it was a match race, and he was 71 years old, and he's 82 now, but he was 71, and he beat Murray on this match race, and Murray was an active rider, so I was very shocked. And that guy could ride. He had a 22-inch tire, and he was just burning rubber on that thing at 71 years old. 71 years old. I mean, come on, give the guy a break. I mean, 71, the guy's winning match races. Go figure that one. I mean, who could do that? So a few years ago, Billy had like a open heart surgery, a quadruple bypass, and he successfully lived through that, and he's still alive today. And we wish you well, Billy, if you get this video. And I was one of your fans back in the day at Costa Mesa when I was a little kid. And I really loved watching Billy Gray race. He was really a great rider.
Billy Gray was the bomb. And another guy who was really good, he started like around the 74. He actually went to Sliding Sonny Nutter's shop and said, I want to ride Speedway. And the rest was history. This guy was really cool. His first uniform was like black, and he had like a black helmet with yellow stripes around it. And they call him the Bumblebee. And then they changed his name. He got rid of it, and he gave me that name. And his name is Bobby Boogaloo Schwartz. Bobby was just the bomb. I mean, he came into Speedway and was like a D1 rider right off the bat. I mean, he didn't hardly have to learn anything. That guy was just good. And his number was 126, like in the background. And then when Mike Bass retired, Bobby took Mike Bass number 11 from him. And so Bobby is number 11 for the past, 50 years or something, since the 80s anyways. And Bobby's just a handsome guy and just a talented rider. I mean, Bobby was just one of the great riders of all time. He actually is the oldest living rider of all time, probably the history of Speedway. This guy right here is going to be the longest rider, going on 50 years of racing Speedway. That's totally insane. I mean, Bobby Schwartz is just a crazy talented. He's good. I mean, Bobby Schwartz still in the mid-60s is still riding and chugging along, and hopefully he can win another main. I think he won his last main at like 59 or 60 or something like that. So Bobby Schwartz just loves riding, and he's getting a little older now, but he's just a great rider, a living legend, Bobby Schwartz. I mean, he's won World Pair Championships with Bruce Penhall, and he's won with Dennis Sigalos. And I mean, the guy just has his credentials a mile long. And here he is with Bruce Flanders talking the crap here at probably Irwindale or something. And they're just talking Speedway. And Bobby Schwartz just is really good. And also, Kelly Moran really likes kissing Bobby, too. So Bobby had a nice big smooch mark on his cheek from Kelly Moran, rest in peace. Those guys are crazy, and they're a lot of fun. We like those guys a lot. And here is Bobby again in the 75 Speedway, his first United States National Speedway program. This was Bobby, a very young Bobby, and he was just a crazy good talent. I mean, Bobby Schwartz was just unbelievable. I mean, there will only be one Bobby Schwartz, and so maybe he could set a record racing for 100 years.
I raced Bobby a few times, and one of the times was in Sacramento. We had a world qualifier. Bobby was in one of my scratch races, and my bike was running pretty good that night, and the tape went up, and Bobby was in first place, and I was in second. And I just said, I'm just gonna keep riding this guy. And I rode Bobby for like 4 laps. I was just riding, like, we were like locked up every turn. And I was thinking, you're gonna crash, Brian. You're gonna crash into Bobby Schwartz. You're gonna take him out. And Bobby just stayed his ground. If you've ever raced against Bobby, he just like stays put. He doesn't, it's hard to push Bobby off the pole. Once Bobby gets on the pole, it's like impossible. He got pushed off the pole, and I won the race at the last lap or last turn. And I was like, I've never seen someone push Bobby Schwartz off the pole. One memory I had of Bobby was in the early 80s. He was racing in England, and I saw him and Bruce Penhall at a track called Hackney in England, in London. And I went up to Bobby after the races, and we talked, and him and Bruce just like beat everybody all night long. Bobby Schwartz and Bruce Penhall was probably one of the best 1-2 punches in Speedway history, in American Speedway history. I mean, nobody could beat those two guys when they were on. They were just on fire. So I got a chance to actually see Bobby Schwartz and Bruce Penhall race in England live at Hackney Stadium. And these guys were just unbelievable. They were just fast as lightning. He's still racing D1. I mean, the guy just never stops. He's a machine. He started in the mid-70s, and he's still riding to this day. And he's won main events just recently. One of the most amazing riders in United States history. And all the years that he's been racing and winning. He's just one of the true greats in United States history, Bobby Schwartz. So that's it with Bobby Boogaloo, number 11. He just has a history like none other. I mean, he just has a history that doesn't stop. And his history still continues to this day. I wonder if he'll ever stop racing. He's one of the true greats in United States Speedway history. And he just keeps going like the Energizer bunny. He just goes and goes and goes. And he's just an incredible athlete, amazing rider, and a very good guy. Number 11, Bobby Boogaloo Schwartz.
That guy is really good. We must pay all of our respect when we meet and see Bobby Schwartz, because he is truly a living legend of the 70s all the way to today. I mean, he's going on 50 years of riding. That alone is completely insane. And some of these guys like Ole Olsen and Ivan Majors, they race like 15, 16, 17 years, and they're like, wow, that's a long time. And then Bobby's pushing 50. That's totally unbelievable. I mean, that record will never be broken, possibly. And so he was really good. And in 1972, there was another young rider. He was really good. This guy was just completely a natural ability, talent. If he actually raced in the United States, he would have won like 4 or 5 or 6 United States Speedway championships. but he ducked out after the first year. He went cold turkey as a rookie and placed second place in the 72 United States Nationals. When have you heard of a rookie that never rode a speedway bike coming in the first year at Costa Mesa and placing second on the podium and ahead of Mike Bass? That is the one, the only, the truly amazing. This guy is truly amazing. Scott Autry. Scott was just a talent. He had actually a lot of motorcycle experience. He had been racing everything for many years. So when Scott got into Speedway, he actually was a really good Speedway rider. But Scott just had that talent. I mean, he was just unbelievable. Scott Autry was truly one of the great riders in American history. Like I say, it's kind of too bad that Scott didn't race in America longer, because Scott was just, I mean, that guy had the talent, unbelievable. And he's a good friend, and he's just a good guy, humble guy. But don't kid yourself, Scott Autry was just the bomb of all bombs in the 70s. He only was there like 1 year before he went to England, and he actually did a test ride over on the Wembley Stadium, and he rode Ronnie Moore, the 1959 world champion, Ronnie Moore's bike, his JP, and he impressed everybody, and he was signed. Ivan Majors saw him and said, I want that guy, Scott Autry. So if you can impress Ivan Majors, you're a really, really good rider.
Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about a very famous Speedway rider in American history. His name is Scott Brian Autry. He raced 10 years Speedway, lots of times in England and Europe, and he was the first American world finalist since the late Ernie Rose Show in 1952. Scott was born in 1953 and started racing flat track at Paris Speedway in 1964. Scott won the 100cc class Rosarita Grand Prix in Mexico. 1971, Scott raced road racing. In 1972, Scott was number 2 at the United States Speedway Championships at Costa Mesa. He was a natural. He went from nothing to like second in the United States. That's what you call a natural born Speedway rider. In 1972, the same year that he placed second in the championships in the United States, Scott went to England and went to Wembley World Final, and there he decided, I'm going to race Speedway full-time. In 1972, he went to England and said, that's it, I'm racing full-time now. Watch out, world. Scott Autry is a full-time Speedway rider. Scott was so good that in 1973, the great late Ivan Major asked Scott to join the Exeter Falcons. And Scott agreed, and he was racing in Europe. Even though Scott is an American, he made his fame in the speedway world racing in Europe. In 1974, Scott won his first British League title, racing for the Swindon Robins and the Poole Pirates. In 1976, Scott placed 9th in the World Final. And in 1978, he placed 3rd place. He was on the podium. In 1978, he finished 3rd place in the World Final and 11th place in the World Long Track Finals in Speedway. In 1980, he finished 2nd in the World Team Cup with legendary Bruce Penhall. Dennis Segalas and Bobby Schwartz. His last year of Speedway was in 1982, and he placed 1st. They won the World Cup Team Championship. He was on the championship team in 1982, and he retired after that competition. He retired on top. What did a fabulous rider like Scott Autry do after Speedway? He went on to NASCAR. In 1985, Scott went on to race in the Winston West Series full-time. After Speedway and race cars, Scott moved to Midland, Texas, and became a rancher and a helicopter pilot. Scott currently works in the Texas court system as a videographer. His hobbies are reading and music. Scott still to this day connects with his friends at Facebook. I've chatted with Scott a couple times, and he's a nice guy. He doesn't know me. He didn't accept my friend request, but he's a great guy, and I really like Scott Autry, the most underrated speedway rider in probably American history. He's just not talked about. And Scott Autry was just an amazing talent, amazing rider. Scott Autry. Well, that's it. Scott Autry, one famous American speedway rider who made his fame in Europe as an American speedway rider. He is so beloved in Europe, and so many people remember Scott Autry in Europe, probably more than America. So, Scott Autry, we salute you. You're one hell of a racer.
Scott Autry was good, and he accepted my friend request, and we talk all the time. So that video was made before, but I didn't care. I like Scott Autry no matter what, even if he didn't accept my friend request, but he did finally. So we're going to move on to the next amazing rider. In 1975, this gentleman came to prominence, and he was the animal number 275. Big Jim Fishback. He was called the animal. Why? Because he was an animal. That guy was crazy. And he was driving into plate riders. I was always afraid of him also. And when I raced him, I thought, oh no, I don't want him. That guy was an animal. And here he is with Denny Berserko Becker, who said that Speedway is not a contact sport. You go tell big animal Jim Fishback that. He will ride right into you, and he will plow you right over. I mean, there has never been a more meaner, bigger, stronger rider than the animal, Jim Fishback. I mean, look at this guy. He look at you, and I think he would like turn your hair white or something like that. Jim Fishback scared the daylights out of me, and he was just a scary dude. I mean, I did not like riding with Jim Fishback because he was really just a scary guy. I'll tell you this story about when I saw Jim Fishback before my race, and he scared the living daylights out of me at age 17.
Welcome back, and today we got some fishermen behind me. You see these guys? They're gonna catch some fish right here in the ocean, so they're gonna have some fun today. Hopefully catch some fish for their family. But today we're going to talk about Jim Fishbeck, the animal. And do you know Jim Fishbeck? He was a crazy rider and really good. So we're going to talk about Jim Fishbeck right now. As a young teen, I remember going to Bottle and Smoke liquor store and picking up Cycle News. I didn't buy it, I was too poor, but I went ahead and read it, and I'd always read about Jim Fishbeck. He was the animal, and he was racing the desert at the time with Larry Rossler. And he was winning everything. I mean, Jim Fishbeck was crazy. Fishbeck ended up saying he got out of the desert racing because when he crashed really good, and there was nobody there to see him but maybe snakes and tortoises. But he wanted to race in front of people, so he switched to Speedway eventually. It was like his first year or so. In 1975, they had a national championship at the LA Coliseum. And Fishbeck was racing, and I sat like the 4th or 5th row back on this certain spot in the track, and Fishbeck was in this race, and he was riding real hard. I don't think he was going to win the championship, but he was a crazy good rider, and he actually hit the wall. He actually hit the wall, and he flew over the wall, and right in front of me there was this like 86-year-old lady, this old grandma who was like really like old, and Fishbeck flew over the fence and he landed on this old lady's leg right in front of me. I looked down like, oh my gosh, and the lady's screaming, and Fishbeck's like, sorry about that, lady. And he gets up and goes back on the track, you know, he's flying over the wall. 3rd row back, Fishbeck is flying over, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And the lady went to the hospital. She had like a broken leg in like 3 areas. That was like my first partial year of racing Speedway in D3 that particular year. And I always said, oh, I don't want to race against Fishbeck. He's kind of crazy dude. And I practiced during the off season and got pretty good. I started the next year in D2 and just pretty much smoked it, and then they quickly put me in D1. And I'll tell you a race, what happened. My first race was Jim Fishbeck, the animal. The following season, I advanced fairly quickly to D1, and I ended up winning like 6 handicap main events that year. But one of my first races in D1, I was preparing to get on the track, and I look at all these great riders who the year before I saw in the United States Nationals, and they're just awesome riders, and I'm feeling really like bad because I'm like nobody. I'm waiting for the race to start, and I'm kind of looking around, and I look behind me, and then there's Jim Fishbeck. He's in my race, and he's looking at me, and he's like, and I said, what the hell is this? And Jim was like ready to eat me up alive, and I'm like, oh my gosh. I got Fishbeck in my race, and he's like snarling at me, and like smoke is coming from his head, and he just looks like deranged and crazy. And I'm like, I don't like this. I don't like this. I'm a punk 17-year-old skinny kid, you know, just out there like thrown in first division. And I said, you know, Brian, you gotta ride hard against this guy, because this guy will probably like knock you off the bike, or he'll eat you up. He was really scary. I mean, look at this guy's face. So the race began, and decided I would have to go fast because I had Fishbeck behind me. I was starting the 0-yard line or 10-yard line. I wasn't very far markage, and I knew Fishbeck was back there ready to eat me up. the race got over with and I just blew everyone away. It was really great. And Fishback was way back there. He didn't catch me. And I realized that I ride better when I'm scared and when I feel like I'm being threatened. So every time when I race, I want to feel that adrenaline rush, you know, like they're gonna get me. And so the same with Penhall. I race Penhall. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the greatest rider ever. I was idolizing these guys last year, and then the next year they're all like racing in my race and they're all like looking dirty at me and everything. And I'm like, I am scared because I was just a punky 17-year-old brat, and I was scared out of my mind. And these guys are just fantastic. They're living legends. Later on in like the year 2006 or so, his son Jimmy started racing the little animal. And Jimmy's a fantastic guy. He's a really good friend of mine. I like Jimmy Fishback. He's a cool dude, number 25. And then his papa, Jim, the animal, would always go with him. And I would look at Jim and he was like, and give me that snarly look. And I'm like, what's up, dude, man? But I was a little older in 2006, so I wasn't a punky 17-year-old at that time, so it wasn't quite as bad. But Jim Fishback, I'm sure, didn't like me the whole time. He probably doesn't like me today, but it doesn't matter because I respect these guys. I really like all these legends and all these former Speedway greats, and they're just like my idols. And I have no hard feelings towards anyone. And I'm sure some of these guys don't like you or don't like me, but it doesn't matter. So that's it, that Jim the Animal Fishback story. It was really cool days, and I liked beating those guys whenever I could. So that's it. Like, share, subscribe, and ring that bell.
Jim Fishback accepted my Facebook friend request, so we're friends now. Jim Fishback and I, we're cool. I like to have Jim on the show for old timers because he is truly an old timer. And next we have Larry Huffman. He was just a crazy good announcer. I think he did like 360 words a minute. We had Larry Huffman on the show, and this was when we had Larry Huffman. This is his thumbnail for his show, and he did this Huffman hop. I called it the shuffle, and Huffman said, no, it's the hop. So Huffman did the hop, and he always wore a tuxedo, white or black one. Larry Huffman was truly one of the legends of Costa Mesa Speedway. I mean, he was there in the glory days. Bruce Flanders was the first announcer, rest in peace. And then Larry Huffman took over for a lot of the 70s, and he razzled and dazzled the crowd.
Welcome back, and today we're going to blog a very special person. But first, we want to thank you for subscribing. We have a flood of subscribers to the channel. Thank you so much. And today we're going to talk about a very famous announcer. He was a super mouth. His name is Larry Huffman. Larry started his announcing career in the early 70s at the Costa Mesa Speedway. One of his first interviews was the legendary Gene Woods. He was a child, a kid at the time. Larry razzle-dazzled the fans for many years, and he was the one to do the Huffman Shuffle. Do you know what that is, the Huffman Shuffle? It was when he announced very famous riders, and he would go crazy, and the crowd would go crazy too. Larry Huffman is the oldest living great motorsport announcer today, and he got his start in Supercross. It was one of the things he did. In 1972, he did the Los Angeles Coliseum Supercross. Larry was just legendary in Supercross for many years. He did Supercross, he did motocross, he did hill climbing. Larry did it all. Larry, at the Speedway races, he wore a tuxedo. He was the only announcer I know that wore a tuxedo. And when I was just a 16-year-old kid, I met Larry Huffman. I was getting ready for racing that night, and Larry Huffman comes in and says, reads my name and says, "Hi, Brian, how you doing?" He had no idea who I was. And I said, "Fine, Larry." I know who he was. And he said, "So tell me more about you." And so I started telling him about me. And Larry is just a great guy, personable. Also, Larry cared about the Speedway riders. I really appreciate that about Larry, and I want to give you a shout out. Accept my friend request on Facebook, okay, Larry? And Larry just picketed for the Speedway riders. When they had the SRA strike, Larry was out there in full force for the Speedway riders. Larry had lots of sayings when he was announcing. He would say, "He's slicker than a mayonnaise sandwich. No damage done except for in his underwear. He's tougher than a $2 steak. He's on him like a dog on a piece of meat." Larry's TV credits include Fantasy Island, Chips, Knight Rider, Miami Vice, and Charlie's Angels. Larry's been on every major TV station, the sports channels, all the major stations, and he co-wrote and co-produced On Any Sunday Part 2. I feel kind of funny doing a blog on a legendary announcer, because Larry Huffman was one of the best. But they called him Supermouth. Why did they call him Supermouth? Because he spoke 300 words per minute. Larry Huffman was the greatest, fastest announcer ever in the world. I guess I'm no Larry Huffman, huh? Larry suffered a serious infection that nearly cost him his life. It was an infection of his leg, and it laid him up for quite a while. Larry has an amazing voice, and he did video games like Spider-Man, Whiplash, Rock and Roll, and Sammy Sosa. He had lots of video games, and he did more. Larry even won the award of the 1994 Miller Lite commercial Wiener Dog Winter Nationals. He was a Wiener Dog voice, and it won many awards. It was on the Super Bowl, World Series, Olympics. Larry's voice was worldwide. One time I was in a recording studio in Anaheim, California, and I was doing some work for one of my movies, and I looked at the next booth over, and there was Larry Huffman recording commercials. He probably did like 10,000 commercials. He was the voice of the Grant Boys. Larry resides in Big Bear, California. One of the great things about Larry is he still has a sense of humor after all these years. Well, that's it. Larry Huffman, an amazing voice, golden voice. God gave him that gift. And we want to thank you for watching the blog on Larry Huffman. And we want to wish him lots of health for many years to come. Once again, thank you so much for watching my blog, and we'd like to invite you to watch some more videos here. So thank you so much, and please like, share, subscribe, and ring that bell.
The 1970s wouldn't be complete and if we didn't talk about this guy. He was amazing. He was the Fox, Bruce the Fox Penhall. Before he became famous, he was just always famous. Bruce Penhall was born a champion, and he actually had a really good hairdo in the top right-hand picture there. That was one of his first Speedway pictures when he was like 16. He was number 145, and he went to 45 when he got his two-digit number, and that's the number Greg Hancock was riding with, his number 45. Actually, here's a picture of Greg Hancock and Bruce the Fox Penhall. Greg was a little guy. He was a little booger at the time, and Bruce Penhall sponsored the famous Greg Hancock. And the rest was history. Both those guys, number 45, and both those guys, world champions. And Bruce the Fox Penhall, this is one of his first United States Nationals, 1975. He actually was in the program. He didn't score a lot, but he actually did pretty well. And he had beautiful leathers. I love those white and orange leathers with a black trim on there. They're gorgeous. Bruce Penhall really had nice uniform. I loved Bruce Penhall's uniform. And he had a few of them, and they're in display. I think Jason Bonsignor has one, and a few other people have those very collectible, very beautiful leathers. I might go to Bates Leathers and have them make me a set myself. Oh, I want to wear one of those Bruce Penhall leathers. Those are really cool. But Bruce Penhall was just truly a legend, one of the greatest riders of all time. He's going to be on the high for part 2. We had Bruce Penhall here a few weeks ago, and we're going to bring him back for another show. He's truly a great guy, a living legend, and we love who? Bruce the Fox Penhall. Well, we love Bruce Penhall. We're trying to play his video. I don't.
Welcome. Today we're going to talk about someone very famous in American Speedway history. Larry Huffman used to call him the Fox, or Juicy Brucey. Bruce the Fox Penhall. Bruce Penhall, considered the number 1 or number 2 best rider in United States history. Here he is sponsoring a young junior rider, Greg Hancock. Both of them are at the very top in American history. Number 1 and number 2 best riders. Toss a coin and you can decide which one. Bruce was born in 1957 in Balboa, California, right at Newport Beach. And Bruce, as a kid, he used to always be like riding his bicycle around the boardwalk, causing trouble, power sliding, preparing to be a future Speedway world champion. He got a Speedway bike as an early teen and started practicing, and he had his first race at the age of 16 at Irwindale. Bruce was just a famous hit. I mean, he was beloved everywhere. He was considered the most handsome and one of the best riders in the United States. He raced for the Irwindale Sprockets when they had the team racing, and Bruce was teamed up with Mike Bass and Gene Woods. What a team! Bruce Penhall, Mike Bass, and Gene Woods. Tragedy hit young Bruce in 1975 as both parents had passed away in an airplane crash coming back from a ski trip. And it just left Bruce devastated. Who wouldn't be devastated? Both parents died in the plane crash. Bruce was very sad and depressed, and who wouldn't be? Even though Bruce's mom and dad never got to see the true champion he became, he dedicated the races to his parents. It drove him and motivated him to become the champion he became. I was cheering for Bruce one year, and the next year I was racing Bruce in D1, my first D1 race at Costa Mesa. Bruce was just an amazing talent. When you raced Bruce, you had to give it all you had, and you're lucky if you could beat him, because Bruce was just an amazing rider, fast as lightning. The guy was just talented. I spoke about riders who just were naturals, and Bruce Penhall is a natural speedway rider. I remember when I was a young speed rider, I was out to chase some of the girls, and the girls were all after Bruce Penhall, not me. And one girl named Debbie Greger, she told me a story of this girlfriend of hers. She saw Bruce Penhall's van in Newport Beach or Balboa, and she crashed into Bruce on purpose. And I said, why did she crash into Bruce? And she said, she wanted to meet Bruce Penhall. So she made an accident and crashed into his van, which said Penhall Company all over it. Bruce was a very famous rider and popular with the chicks. All the chicks like Bruce Penhall. In 1978, a young Bruce Penhall was invited to go race in the British League. He was getting a little tired of the race scene in America. He was not going too much further than what he was because he was great. So Bruce said, yeah, I'll go ahead and race. In Europe, Bruce became an instant hit. He raced for the Heathens, even though he was no heathen. Bruce took this team who was just like not very popular and made it one of the most popular. I used to follow Bruce, and Bruce's average was astronomical. He was like #1 on the team. He averaged like 12 or 13 points a match out of 15. Bruce was just amazing. No wonder why all the people just fell in love with Bruce Penhall. He had good looks, was a talent, was just American dream. Bruce Penhall was very, very famous, and everyone loved Bruce Penhall. In 1979, Bruce won the Europe Masters of Speedway competition. The same year, he also won the Gold Helmet Match Race Champion. In 1980, Bruce was the Overseas Rider of the Year in Europe. And he also won the United States Championship at Costa Mesa Speedway. That was his first year of racing for the World Championship. I believe he got 5th place in his first attempt. It wasn't until 1981 that Bruce hit full stride. He became the world champion at Wembley Stadium. The last time they had a world championship at Wembley in front of 92,500 people. In 1981, Bruce Penhall won the Best Pairs Champion with his best friend, Bobby Boogaloo Schwartz. In 1981, Bruce became the AMA Pro Athlete of the Year. Also in 1981, Bruce Penhall received a special recognition award by then President Ronald Reagan. In 1981, Bruce Penhall became the British League Speedway Champion. In 1982, Bruce Penhall won the World Championship again, back to back. The first ever American Speedway rider to win a World Champion back to back at the Los Angeles Coliseum in Los Angeles, California. He was also the captain of the US Speedway World Championship team. Bruce only raced 8 years of Speedway, and what he did in 8 years, people wish that they could do in a lifetime. After the World Championship in 1982, Bruce hung it up. He retired and went into acting and on the TV show Chips. Bruce definitely had the Hollywood looks, and they actually planned the TV show and the Chips that he would win the World Championship. So he had this pressure on him to be #1 and to win that championship. And guess what? He won the World Championship. How many people could do that? How many people could plan on winning a World Championship on a TV show and then go ahead and go out and do it? Bruce Penhall, he can do it. The master of pressure. That's it, Bruce Penhall, one of the most amazing riders in United States history in Speedway. He just was a talented guy. I mean, people like Bruce come once in a lifetime, and Bruce Penhall should be proud of his accomplishments. In only 8 years, he did what many riders could never do. Bruce Penhall, we salute you. You're one hell of a rider. Like, subscribe, and ring that bell.
I'd say he was an okay rider, maybe fair to middling. He was all right. Bruce Penhall, I mean, come on. That guy is a living legend of all living legends. So in the 1970s, we were introduced to this young man who became a living legend. So it was a good year, a good era of Speedway. And they had some pretty cool stuff going on in the 70s that they haven't had since. And one of them was the team racing. They had the National Speedway League, and that was really just a neat particular program. And they had really cool races. The team racing, they had the Ventura Sharks. Let's see if I can remember. They had the Orange County Eagles. They had the LA Sprockets. They had the San Bernardino Sizzlers. And they had the Bakersfield Bandits. The Bakersfield Bandits. We have those again with Steve Evans. So we're the revival of Bakersfield. And we're going to talk about the Team Speedway right now.
Welcome back, and today we're going to talk a little bit about a piece of Speedway history that you won't find anywhere but right here. And we're going to talk about it. It's the 1976 Speedway team event. They only raced the Speedway team event for 1 year, and 1976 was the last year of the SRA. The SRA, do you remember that one? It was the Speedway Racers Association, Riders Association, whatever. The cool thing about the racing event, it was during the glory days of Speedway. It was the days of the Rocket, Rick Woods, Mike Bass, Bruce Penhall, Lightning Larry Shaw, Wild Bill Cody, the glory days of Speedway had them all. Bobby Boogaloo Schwartz, Danny Bazurko Becker. They had so many riders like the Nutters, Steve Nutter and Sonny Nutter. There was just amazing riders. There was Jim the Animal Fishback. The team racing was pretty much at the end of the glory days of Speedway, and they had just amazing characters. during that time. The Speedway League had 5 teams and a total of 25 match events. The teams included the Orange County Eagles, based at Costa Mesa Fairgrounds, the Ventura Sharks at Ventura, California Beach, the San Bernardino Sizzlers, based at the Sizzler Steakhouse. And what else did they have? Let's see. The Bakersfield Bandits in Bakersfield, California. And the team that I liked was the Irwindale Sprockets. It was called the National Speedway League. The National Speedway League. Do you remember that one? Probably not. And it was just a normal speedway activity. They had one team race the other team, 2 guys on each race, a total of 3 points for the winner, 2 points for the second place, 1 for third, and 0 points for the last place. You don't deserve that if you get last place. And they had a total of 4 rides, so you could get a total of 12 points max. But they had a main event for the top point getters of the night, and that was another 3, 2, 1, 0. For that year, Mike Bass was the leading top scorer with 13 points average. I like that one. How could you get 13 if there was 12 max? No, he was in the main and did really well. Bruce the Fox Penhall was second behind his teammate Mike Bass of the Sprockets with 11 points. Third and fourth went to the Bakersfield Bandits, Dangerous Dub Farrell and Sexy Jeff Sexton. Check it out, we found some programs from the Los Angeles Sprockets. I have to admit that my favorite team was the Los Angeles Sprockets, led by Michael Bass, Bruce Penhall. They had Gene Woods, Norm Denny, Rob Morrison, and Craig Schaefer. They had a lot of really good riders on the Los Angeles Sprockets. But the team that won that year was the Bakersfield Bandits, led by Digger Helm, the promoter. Digger went ahead and talked to the riders, and they prepared the track and the motorcycles to ride on that track. Digger went ahead and told everyone, you must run the 19-inch Carlisle tires, and we're going to prepare this track to be a hard blue groove track. And guess what? The Bakersfield Bandits won 17-6, and they didn't lose any at home. Why? Because they were prepared, and they had the track prepared. They were smart. The riders for the Bakersfield Bandits were as follows: Dub Farrell, Jeff Sexton, Jim Grisham, Steve Nutter, Brian Short, Burke Hawkins, and Dan Toomey. Congratulations, Bakersfield Bandits, for being the champions. And the second place runner-up was my team, the Irwindale Sprockets, led by Michael Bass, Bruce Penhall, Gene Woods, Norm Denny, Steve Colombo, Rob Morrison. Third place went to the Ventura Sharks, led by Bobby Boogaloo Shorts, Danny Bazurko Becker, Sonny Nutter, Scott Sivage, Randy Marsh, Dave Sims, and Mike Bendy. Fourth place that year went to the San Bernardino Sizzlers, led by Jim the Animal Fishbeck, Lightning Larry Shaw. There was a young Dennis Sagalos on that team. Mark Cherry, Dean Foreman, Ron Preston, and Rod Sexton. Surprisingly, the 5th place team was led by Rocket Rick Woods of the Orange County Eagles. They had a really good team. They had Wild Bill Cody, Alan Crazy Christian, Billy Gray, Mike Montine, Jan Ballard, and Ron Rose. Harry Oxley had a pretty good team, and they ended up in last place. The team racing was really exciting. I like that one. I was hoping that it would stay around forever. Actually, I was hoping I would ride on one of those teams. I was just below getting on one of those teams, and then that was it. 1 year, and now no more. I think that the 76 season was the last year of the glory years. That was the year that Harry Oxley kicked the SRA out. Also, the people, they seemed to not like the team racing. Why? They wanted to see all the all-stars race every week. Everyone race. And when they went to some of the meets, they didn't like the other team. So it created some problems. And that led to 1 year, and then it was no more. Because people were spoiled. They like to see all the top riders all the time. Can you go 30? Excuse me, but I'm having a coconut in paradise. I have a coconut with a straw. Hold on. Delicious. So that was the last year of the team racing, but the coconut is still here. And it was just a lot of fun. I love the team racing. It was exciting. They had all those matching uniforms, those leathers from Bates. It was just amazing. I just love that. And like I say, I was hoping I would ride. The team racing only lasted 1 year. Excuse me a second. Hold on. If you want a good 50-cent coconut, you come here. That was it, the National Speedway League. It lasted only 1 year, and you won't find that anywhere online except for right here. I like making stories about the history that people can't find anywhere because people need to remember these things. And I like doing that one too. So thank you so much for visiting us today. The 1 year National Speedway League. Please click here for more videos. There's some really cool videos you might want to check out, and subscribe right there. So thank you so much, and please like, share, subscribe, and always ring that bell.
That was fun, the team racing. I like that one, and it was just really cool. And also, the 75 United States Nationals, Harry Oxley went ahead and he rented the LA Coliseum, which is pretty amazing. And they just had this event here. It was really one of the most famous Speedway Nationals in history. It was really good. They had a lot of people, too, at that. And then Mike Bass ended up winning that championship. And Dangerous Dub Farrell, he was number 2, just behind Mike Bass. And he was my Speedway teacher just shortly after that particular event. And then Steve Bass was the reigning national champion, and he didn't win that night. He didn't even get second place. He wasn't even on the podium. I think he had a bad night on that long track. And then you had Lightning Larry Shaw. He's a really great rider before, and I'm trying to get Larry on the show. So come on the show, Larry. And we'd love to have you for the Legends Week. Lightning Larry Shaw. And we had Mike Caruso. He was really a good rider, and he was always in the hunt. Every time you saw a particular championship, you'd always see him there. And then we had the early day team captain, Slidin' Sonny Nutter. He was always good. He was the first glamour boy of Speedway. Look at Slidin' Sonny. He was handsome. He was really a good-looking guy, and he was a good rider, Sonny Nutter. I mean, that guy could ride. He was talented. He had the early days in the TT, the flat track. I asked Sonny to come on the Legend Show, and he said, we'll talk to you, and then talk to me. We'd love to. we have some fun talking with Sonny Nutter. I mean, that guy has some stories. So we'd love to hear from Slide Sonny Nutter. He was truly an amazing rider. But that 1975 United States Speedway Championship at the LA Coliseum was really classic. And we're going to talk about that one right now.
Welcome back. We have Vivov here, and today we're going to talk about one of the most amazing nights in US Speedway history. It was amazing, and nowhere online, like in Google or Yahoo, can you find it. So we're going to talk about it right now. The 1975 US Speedway National Championship at the LA Coliseum. This was the godfather of Speedway, Harry Oxley's most famous promotion. He rented the Los Angeles Coliseum for a national championship. I was a young speedway rider, just finished my first few weeks of racing in D3, and I was proudly at that event wearing my Bell Helmets jacket. What was more amazing than Harry Oxley's promotion was the riders, the list of 16 top United States riders, and we're going to talk about those right now. Steve Bass was the current #1 national champion. He was seeking his 3rd national championship. Alan Crazy Christian, the top rider from Northern California, seeking another #1 plate. The Rocket, Rick Woods, the top superstar from Huntington Beach, California. Lightning Larry Shaw, he was fast as lightning. Mark Cherry in his first national championship. And the person who won that national championship, Mike Bass, with a perfect score of 15 points. Sexy Jeff Sexton, he missed winning last year's national championship by 1 point. Sonny Nutter, one of the most famous and popular riders of his time. Rich McMurray, the current #1 plate holder in Northern California. Scott Sivage, a very hot, fast rider, expected to do really well. Wild Bill Cody, a famous rider, and he was one of the original 5 to help bring Speedway back to the United States of America. Bruce the Fox Penhall, future United States and 2-time world champion. Mike Caruso, a very powerful and strong rider. He can win just about any national championship. Dangerous Doug Farrell. He finished 2nd place that night in the national championship with 12 points, right behind Mike Bass. Bobby Boogaloo Swartz. Bobby didn't win that night. That was his first national championship, but he went on to win multi-national championships and World Best Pairs championships with Bruce Penhall. Lastly, Jim the Animal Fishbeck. He was that rider who flew 3 rows into the stadium that night and broke an old lady's leg. We'll talk about that one. The 1975 United States National Championship at the LA Coliseum was one of the most amazing events. You had to be there. It was one of the greatest nights in US Speedway. And like I mentioned, you can't find it anywhere online except for right here. It was amazing. There was lots of activities. The announcers were great, the trophy girls, the people in the stands. The stands were packed at the Los Angeles Coliseum. Mike Bass won that championship with a perfect score of 15 points. Doug Farrell finished 2nd with 12. And tied with 12 was a reserve rider. Amazing, Steve Nutter. He went ahead as a reserve rider and finished on the podium, third place with 12 points. I guess there was a tiebreaker between Dub and Steve Nutter, and Dub won that. But amazing, a reserve rider, Steve Nutter, got third. We haven't mentioned him before. And there was several amazing sponsors. And we want to mention them. It's 35 years later, and we're going to honor those sponsors. I'm serious, that was one of the best Speedway nights in US history. It was amazing, like I mentioned. And that experience with Jim the Animal Fishbeck. I was sitting 5 rows behind the wall, and this old lady was sitting, and he crashed and he flew over the wall. He said he doesn't like to race the desert because there's not a lot of people to watch him wipe out. Well, he wiped out right in front of me and broke this old lady's leg in 3 places, and she screamed. And Jim Fishbeck gets up and says, "Sorry, lady." And then he climbs over the wall and he gets on his broken bike, but then he has to push it back to the pits. It was an event that was well worth your money. If you paid to see that race, you really got your money's worth. Those riders back in the 70s were just classic. I mean, they were just amazing. Several of them have since passed away, rest in peace. We miss you guys. And you guys just performed an amazing show. And we really appreciate that experience at the Los Angeles Coliseum. Thank you so much for watching this video. It means a lot to me, and for subscribing to my channel and joining the family of viewers. If you like this content, please subscribe. And thank you so much. So please like, share, subscribe, and ring that bell.
The 1970s was just the classic. I mean, the greatest writers ever, the greatest show ever was in the 70s. Sad to say, but it's true. I have to be honest. But we have some really good writers today, and they're going to give it a run for their money. And so that's really cool. And we actually have a show in a couple hours, another show, a live stream show. And we have the Rocket, Russell Green, going to be on that show. And we're going to do a little preview of the show in a couple hours. Welcome to the Northern California Week in the Hive. And we have a really great week. It's all Northern California Week, starting with the amazing Russell Green, the Rocket in the Hive. Then following Russell, we have the promoter of Fast Fridays, the one, the only, Dave Joyner. After Dave, we have a writer, a very very good young writer, very talented, Mr. Reese Todd. It's going to be an all Northern California week this week in the Hive. You're not going to want to miss it. We may have some surprise visitors, so stay tuned. All week, Northern California is in the Hive. Northern California in the Hive. Be there! Be there! Yeah, it's only 2.5 hours away. We're going to prepare for that show right now. So thank you so much for hanging out with us in the Hive today, talking about the 1970s Speedway. It was truly unbelievable. I mean, that was just classic. If you missed it, I'm very sorry. You really missed it, but at least you got a little taste of it right here. So thank you so much for joining the 1970s Speedway. It was truly, really great. And we're going to have the Rocket Russell Green in the Hive in 2.5 hours. So you'll want to come back for that. It's going to be a great. Russell is just riding out of this world. He is really developing into an amazing young rider, and he's just completely starting to dominate. And we're going to watch out for that guy. He's really taking over. Russell Green, the Rocket. So we're going to look forward to talking with Russell in just a couple hours. So thanks so much for hanging out with us in the Hive. We'll see you in a couple hours. Ride safe if you're going riding. Stay on two wheels, and we'll see you in a couple hours with Russell Green.